All right. Well, welcome everybody to today's meeting is May 7th, 2025 of the Technical Steering Committee, our open public session. And Duncan, you have the agenda, I believe. I'm filling in as co-chair for Kevin, who couldn't be here this morning.
Absolutely.
All right. So yeah, first item on the agenda is addressing some concerns about PN Sol and well typed. So that's for Mr. Davies.
Thank you, sir. So actually, I was going to frame this, the first question, in terms of the contract, maintenance contract, if you don't mind. On the 30th of even the 30th of April, several of the people that were named in the name contract were summarily, I'm trying to get that word right, summarily let go by IOG. And so I would like, Vicky, could you explain the circumstances in which this occurred, please?
Not really. It's certainly not my doing.
So you were not aware of the fact that IOG suppliers were summarily terminated?
And I didn't say I wasn't aware of it. I don't know the precise reason.
Oh, could you tell us what actually occurred then, just the facts?
The contracts were terminated with both PN Sol and well typed, and that's it. I mean, what more is there to say?
Okay, so the contract sort of states that when we were working under the contract. So what I'm trying to say is that the contract states that named individuals, and who are you going to substitute for those named individuals?
Well, we are already filling in various areas with internal people, and we will also be adding additional contractors to fill in other roles, not necessarily directly in replacement, but we will be taking on other people. But there's some internal movements as well among the team that was named in the list.
Okay, and can you tell us what areas are actually at the greatest risk for delivery at this point?
For delivery on
in the sense that there's a continuity problem to do with, I mean, which teams were the most affected, and which were ones where we see a delay in delivery because of that effect?
I don't think we're expecting any delays in delivery.
And all the teams are at full strength?
No, the networking team needs some propping up, which we're working on at the moment. But at this moment in time, we're not expecting any delays in delivery. There's some reshuffling that's going on. Nothing that's particularly worrying.
Okay, so I think I would just to say, Duncan, do you have anything you'd like to say at this point?
I think the people who are of my colleagues who are directly working on things, we're not in areas that were critical to, upcoming deliveries, upcoming releases, like major releases. But I think, I suppose the two obvious ones. I mean, obviously, the KES agent will be delayed because the person that was working on that is no longer. But it's not a time critical component. It's something that we've been putting off for 5 years. It can be put off some more. Obviously, making up. I mean, our experience generally, I think, Neil, you'll remember this as well. Our experience generally with bringing new staff in the networking area is it takes quite a long time. It takes like 6 months for people to come up to to speed to become productive, and not everybody makes it. I mean, we've had, IOG has hired people in the past to join the networking team, and they've not survived that 6 months. So yes, I mean, I'm sure Rick is absolutely right. There's no immediate impact there, but one can expect, taking away a quarter of that team.
Well, actually,
it'll take 6 months or more to get back to where they were.
It was half the team, Duncan.
Yes, I suppose. I mean, Carl is sort of
isn't actually a
part-time.
member of the team in that sense. Yes, he
Perhaps
doesn't.
not. He's not. I mean, he's certainly not named on any contract.
Yes. So.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that would be a third of the team in that case.
Is there? Do you see any wider I mean, given other work that was being done that was also terminated, do you see any other wider implications of these actions?
Well, it'll definitely have impact on delivery of LEOS. It'll definitely have impact on delivery of LSM integration, because those are the things that we were lined up to be doing next. As I'm sure many of you know, we're about to deliver the LSM component for Intersect as under a contract with Intersect, which is not affected by contracts with IOG, which we will deliver as per the contract. So don't worry about that. The initial integration of that, the existing consensus team will have no difficulty in doing the basic integration of LSM, but there'll be a capacity issue for the next phase because of LEOS, basically, because you have to do to get where you want to go for implementing LEOS. We need to implement LEOS and do the LSM integration, not because they're technically dependent on each other, but they're both about scaling. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense to deliver LEOS but not yet have finished, the full LSM integration. So that it's as Neil would put it, it's a last to finish synchronization between the two. So the discussions I had been having with Dimitri, the project manager for IOG for LEOS, was that some of my colleagues, we were lining things up. It hadn't been formally arranged yet, obviously, but we'd been lining things up so that some of my colleagues would be working directly on LEOS, helping with transfer from the R&D project, or directly working on the next phase of design and delivery, and some would be making up for other staff, like, for example, in the consensus team, by some of my colleagues being able to work on LSM integration, then other folks who work directly for IOG would be able to work on LEOS. So, in total, that creates a capacity problem for LEOS of about 7 people, including, 3 people who are actually working on the LEOS R&D project. So there's also, and in fact, all the people that were working on the prototype for LEOS. There is another simulation, but it's not a prototype. So yeah. Okay. But LEOS is not like ongoing maintenance, obviously. LEOS is one of these things where depends on your point of view, doesn't it? Do we need to scale? Do we not? My view is we do. That's what I've always said. But that doesn't pose any immediate short-term problems.
Okay. So I think so
there's two questions. Should we ask Adam and
go on, Matt? Matt's going to go on, Matt.
I was just gonna say that I appreciate the concern, but we need to talk about it in terms of the work, not the people, right? IO are at liberty to work with whomever they choose.
Oh, absolutely.
That's their discretion.
Absolutely.
And the questions I think would be better articulated is if we have evidence that the work isn't proceeding or impacted as we believe. And
there is also a people person apart from contracts, though. I mean, there is a people person because there's a brain drain problem. But that's maybe a slightly separate problem that we can talk about as well.
I don't feel, unless we have evidence that that's cause and effect and it's damaging somewhere. So there's people in the ecosystem which are struggling because the resource isn't there, the knowledge isn't there. then really without the evidence. And again, we don't have that contract signed yet.
No, yeah, I realise, we're working in this nebulous domain, but I think I was just wanted to make sure that, we're trying to act in an open, fair fashion here. We have to basically point out to the community that there's a bump in the road, and basically, we are telling them as soon as we're practical about the nature of the bump. Now, I have no more questions. If we're going to move on to the second point, I was going to...
Adam has his hand up.
Yeah. Sorry, Adam.
Yeah, being mindful of the time and wanting to move on to some of the other talking points for today. Duncan, could you maybe expand just briefly on the connection between LSM and Laos? Because I don't think I fully understood where those are connecting.
Yeah, so I mean, at the high level, it's about scalability, right? But more specifically, so if you're going to get to a world in Leos is looking at a world of like 1,000 TPS, and it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense to say we'll try and hit 1,000 TPS, but we're still going to be using 64 gigabytes of memory. For one thing, you won't actually hit the 1,000 TPS if you're using that much memory. Secondly, the expense is going to be too high. You can get away with storing all the data in memory as we did when you're running at a lower scale, but when you're running at a high scale, you can't really do it, either from a cost point of view or even a straight performance point of view. We wouldn't be able to actually hit the throughput.
And also the point is that LSM and what the LSM was to permit the UTXO to scale without the memory scaling, right? Yeah. And that means even if we were to even forget about TPS, imagine people actually started adopting Cardano as a major platform, and we're creating lots of UTXOs. Without the LSM, we would have cliffs in the performance because of there would not be memory use.
And the LSM has also been specified; its performance requirements have been specified with Leos in mind as well.
So it's about. I mean, it is about getting rid of. Basically getting rid of the relationship between UTXO and memory footprint, right? That's the point. So it can scale without scaling footprint.
Okay, so to put a TLDR on it, essentially, we need LSM as a first step towards Laos, essentially.
Yes, but also we want the full integration of LSM generally. I mean, to put it bluntly,
right? LSM helps even if we don't ever do Laos. Yeah.
Right. Even if we were never to do Laos, Amaru will eat our lunch. Because they're doing it straight away. We took this massive shortcut, 7 years ago, whatever it was, when we did Shelley. I can't remember how many years now. And by not putting the data on disk, but they're going straight for the design that we were aiming for, and not going via the shortcut. And when they get there, they'll say, "Oh, we're so much faster and we use so much less memory because we've done it, properly now," which is what the on-disk storage project and the LSM is there to do. But it needs the second phase of the LSM integration, which is about moving the rest of the ledger state onto disk. We've done the first half basically with the release that's about to go out quite soon, I believe. That gets the UTXO onto disk with a slightly lower performance disk component, but integrating the LSM will help a little bit there. But the next bit is getting the rest of the ledger state, which is all the stake related tables, which are a bit more complicated, and the LSM has a bunch of features to make that work better. So that's the other one that needs to be integrated sort of properly, which is not strictly speaking LSM integration. It's really doing the second half of getting the ledger state to disk, but it takes advantage of some of the features that the LSM has. It was specifically designed with those features in mind, with the features required. I mean, its functional requirements were specifically tuned for, what does the ledger need, so that we can get the rest of the tables on disk. And we need to do that to get the memory use right down. And then we're talking 2 to 4 gigs, and we'll be competitive with any with any other third-party implementation that comes along.
All right, great. Thank you. Johnny, if you could real
Yeah,
quick. So
just
we
gonna
can
tie
move
a
on to
bow
the
on
next point.
Yeah, just going to tie a bow on it from last week. The LSM integration, as far as I understand, is needed for SPUs to be able to reduce the memory footprint.
Yes.
And that was covered last week. We have LMDB integration coming up, but that isn't for
That's right.
SPUs to run. And yeah, so we need to make sure that the LSM is still delivered for SPUs to be able to reduce their memory footprint. Thank you.
Yeah. So, and the initial integration will be straightforward, and the existing team will be able to handle it without a great deal of work because it's all been lined up, so it just slots right in. But the next phase, where we get the so that's still just putting the UTXO on disk. But the next phase, where we get the rest of the legislate on disk, is a good deal more work. It's something that needs both consensus and ledger work in both areas and the interface between the two. And it's something that my colleagues and I prototyped a couple of years ago. So yeah, that'll be a capacity problem. Ben, got a question?
No, just sort of a request to move on. Is there a motion on the table here, or are we free to move ahead?
I think we did. I have no motion on the table here. I mean, I think the only thing is, I think the concern is my concern is getting the continuity, making sure that the stuff, all the delivery and the effects can be managed more than anything else, right? I feel that we are at more risk than we were a week ago.
Duly noted. Shall we move ahead?
It would be nice if Kevin could join us, but due to other circumstances, there's a mutual exclusion between Kevin and Ricky at the moment. So we would ask if you don't mind, Ricky, can we ask you to leave so Kevin can join?
Well, do we have, if we could real quick, we have a point number 3 that we may need to jump ahead on because there was a clarification on the IOE maintenance contract. And I'm sure Ricky would want to address any concerns there.
Yeah. I think from the point of view, the clarification is Ricky is telling us that timescales and delivery won't be affected. So I think we'll see how things pan out.
Okay. So does that address point 3 to your satisfaction for right now?
Actually, it was sort of, I was expecting to be slightly the other way around in the order of the agenda. That's fine. I'm happy with that.
Okay.
So,
all right. So yeah, I'm unaware or unfamiliar with any conflicts of personnel being in attendance. So Ricky,
And so am I.
I would just respectfully ask if you could leave so that Kevin could join. That would be great.
What reason?
I can't even tell. You'll have to find out from. I can't even tell you that. That's the problem with what's going on at the moment. So you need to talk with your senior management as to why that is the case at this point in time.
I mean, no. Why should I leave?
Well, Kevin can't join.
Motion to move to in camera.
Okay.
Do we already have a scheduled session for that? And if so, can we carry on with the normal meeting that's going up on YouTube and move to that?
Okay, Kevin's about to talk about the interface. Okay, so we could basically move the rest of everything else to in camera at this point if you wanted to. But Kevin was actually down to talk about the possible inter-era hard fork.
What's that relating to?
Yeah.
What's the cause of that inter-era hard fork?
I think we would need Kevin to talk to that. He has the details at this point.
all right. Well, I would like to still address the KES agent and some of these other points in open session if we could.
Yes, let's do that.
Yeah.
So it came to my attention last week. I was unable to join because I was still jet lagged from traveling back from Vietnam, that there was some mention about the KES agent and who should essentially own maintenance and ownership of that repository moving forward. I, for one, am still highly critical of KES agent and whether or not there's actually a substantial lead customer who's actually going to utilize this. So I am leery of bringing it under the IO or the Intersect umbrella of maintenance and management, only because that creates another
I
dish
can
on our
advocate
plate
for
that
that
we
if
have
that's
to.
helpful, but maybe
Yeah,
now
absolutely.
not
I would like
moment.
to kind of steelman that a little bit to make it make sense why
Sure.
why
Yeah, yeah.
Intersect should own this
Sure.
going forward.
Yeah. Should I do that right now?
Please, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So basically, the story is that we cut a major corner in the implementation of Preos when we were implementing Shelley back in the day, and it took quite a while to get around to doing it properly. And the corner that we cut is that we didn't fully implement KES key handling. We didn't implement KES key handling in full. We implemented KES key handling in such a way that it could be compatibly upgraded. So it goes through all the motions. It does all the crypto functionally for KES, but it doesn't actually achieve the property that KES is intended to achieve. So those of you who remember, the great announcement of Preos, what does Preos bring us? There was two main things that it brought us. One was a private leader schedule, which is because of the RFs, so that you can't attack. Anyway, blah blah blah. And the other one was forward security, and that's why we have KES keys. Except we don't actually have forward security, even though we do have KES keys, because we took a major shortcut. And the shortcut that we took is that the KES keys are stored on disk. The KES 0 key for the current period of evolution is stored on disk, and in practice, it's not reliably possible to. Well, first of all, that KES 0 key is kept for the whole 90-day period. So even if it were deleted, that KES, it's not a forward. It's not a rotation on a 36-hour period. It's a rotation on a 90-day period. So again, it's like useless compared to just using an ordinary digital signature. And the other thing is that because it's stored on disk, in practice you can't delete things from disk reliably. There's all sorts of reasons why, which we don't have to go into right now. Which means that again, you're not achieving the forward security that KES is intended to achieve. So the way to handle KES keys properly is that they must never be stored on disk, ever, ever, ever. From the point at which they are created to the point at which they are evolved and used, and transferred from one machine to another machine, they must never be stored on disk. And there's a bunch of changes in the crypto internally in the library to make sure that they're always kept in a location in memory which can be erased, so they not get spread around the memory and stuff like that. But the big thing that SPOs see is a change in the KES key management, and that's what the KES agent is an attempt to do. So I would distinguish there being kind of two parts of this. Like there's the bit that kind of we have to do if we are telling ourselves that we're going to do Preos properly, and that is that we have to finally get the forward security element of KES in. And then there's the bit that's kind of like, well, we get to choose. There's a lot of choice in exactly how we do it, and that's the KES agent. So we have to do something, which means that we never store the KES keys on disk. Otherwise, we're not actually achieving forward security. And then all the consequences that flow from that for the system. Like, why are we advertising that we do forward security? Well, okay, maybe that's a slightly separate discussion. That might take a little longer. But there are system-wide advantages to the users of the system for having forward security in KES. And you can go back and look at the original paper and see why that is. And then you can imagine how does that translate into who getting hacked, etc. What sort of real life circumstances correspond to the attack described in the paper. But yeah, the bit that there's a good deal of flexibility about, and it's absolutely worth getting people's feedback, and you've got to get people on board and all the rest of it, is exactly how do you do the key management in a way that's not too annoying, basically. So the KES agent is a good faith attempt to have a decent design for doing that, but it's the whole internally it's designed with a protocol so that you can have any KES agent you like. It has to speak a particular protocol with the node, and it has to achieve certain properties, including not storing the KES key on disk, but multiple implementations are possible, multiple strategies are possible, and that was the approach that we were pursuing. But I realize it's a bit of a hard sell because like we've come along and said we've got Preos, everything's awesome, and then later, oh, by the way, sorry, there's this extra thing that you have to do that we didn't tell you about for 5 years. Although if you were paying attention closely, you could see that that was true because the KES keys are stored on disk. So there's my steel man for you.
Can I just jump in
appreciate it,
on an admin?
Duncan C. But yeah, Duncan S. Please go ahead. You had your hand up first.
Sure. Just a quick admin point. How sensitive is this? Should I edit the YouTube recording to cut this section?
It's not sensitive.
It's not sensitive. Fine. Thank you.
It's a bit embarrassing, but it's not sensitive. Yeah.
Yeah, this has already been shared publicly and stuff during like the KES agent launch and everything as well too.
Yeah.
So.
I mean, I know it sounds like a little bit, and for that reason, comms people never really wanted to talk about it, and because comms people never wanted to talk about it, it was very hard to get project managers to agree to get on with it. But yeah, it's sort of embarrassing, but not. And in any case, it's obvious to anyone who understands what KES does. It's all publicly available information. And SPOs can see that they are managing their keys by putting the KES 0 key on the disk. So if you break into that machine, you have access to the KES 0 key. At least the current one, if not previous ones. So that much is all clear anyway. Jonathan?
No, it's Adam first.
Oh.
Yeah, so just my point, or kind of my big contention, is that this feels kind of like just an exercise in academia. Like, because it was mentioned that we have to do it this way in a paper 8 years ago, now we're getting around to it. But we already made the shortcut, and SPOs have already kind of signaled that they have no intent to actually utilize this software as proposed, because we've Pavlovian trained them to engage and behave in a certain way, essentially. So like you said, it's going to be a tough sell. And so my problem
it's not a great situation. I mean, it would have obviously been better to do it from the beginning, and then people would have just said, "Oh, that's how it works." So I think it might need the two ways this can go. I think we can do our best, and maybe hopefully the TSC would agree that this that we should try and encourage the community to go in this direction. Is that we say, yes, we do want, we can think through, what is the mapping from the attack in the paper, which I know looks a bit academic, into what does that mean today? What would that really mean today? And what would that mean for the users? Because it's not really about SPOs. It's not for their benefit. It's for the benefit of the users of the system, for the safety of the, of the assets and everything, the safety of the chain.
Yeah, we've got a number of hands now. So let's go to Johnny. And then,
but sorry, just before I finish,
go ahead.
Say, so we can either say, we can persuade the community that this is the way we should do it, and I realize that might be a bit of a take a little while, and we need to take people's feedback on board, and make KES agent better, and blah blah blah, all that sort of stuff. But the other is we say, all right, if everyone says like we don't need it, we just take it out, which means at the next hard fork we can stop doing KES at all, because there's no point. So we can go this way or we can go that way, but there's no point doing what we're doing right now.
Right. Okay. I mean, so that puts maybe the finest point on it that anybody could, is that right now what we're doing is an exercise in false security, potentially. Which is fine to acknowledge that and say it publicly. That's what the TSC is here for, is to have these difficult conversations. So, but let's get some of these hands. It's Johnny, Marcus, and then Neil, please.
So just implementation questions that have come up over the demos and things, just for record, for anybody watching and clarity. So one of the requirements of the KES agent would be a high availability setup. So at least 3 servers in order to maintain the KES rotations in case server reboots, for example. You would lose that in memory unless you had a means by which to repropagate if one of the servers went down.
Oh, you mean if you want to maintain a high availability setup, then you need
because otherwise you would get a wholly new KES key and you would have to go and get a new upsert and do it again if you lost that. So I would say it's a sort of de facto requirement to have a high availability setup, because if you accidentally restart a server, you would lose your KES key rotations in the middle of a 62 rotation period. But yeah, so that's something that might be a pushback. I'm just sort of highlighting things that people might say. Another thing is KES agent doesn't have any kind of authentication built into it at the moment. So it was taught during the demos, they were talking about leveraging something like SSH tunneling as a methodology, which caused some pushback from people because they have SSH separations, isolation between servers. Maybe they're using a jump box server with only one point of ingress. So like they're concerned about creating 3 interconnected SSH tunnels. There's ways around that with things like WireGuard and using TCP instead. But yeah, it's just something.
These are all completely reasonable things that have to be discussed.
It's more about writing the documentation, I guess, and making sure that people are properly educated up front, like what the best practice setup is. But just these are the concerns that have come up.
Yeah, well,
And those are completely legitimate concerns.
Yeah, this wasn't to get into the nuts and bolts of how KES necessarily works, but rather who should maintain it. And to that end, I would like to point out that there was some question of whether it would be TSC ownership or open source committee ownership under the OSC. And part of that discussion that we had during the OSC last week, during the last meeting, was whether or not Well-Typed would be potentially interested in bubbling this up through the regular contribution ladder as part of the open source framework, to get and find kind of community support and community contribution and maintenance, again, versus just attaching a new anchor to the big ass bucket of community money that we're planning on spending on a yearly basis without clear benefit to the community.
So I have a slight conflict here, because it is my colleague who's been working on the KES agent for the last 2 years, and all the KES stuff underneath, not just the agent. The agent's just the visible part. So I mean, yes, I would be happy to go and get him money to continue working on the thing, because I think it's important, and also because he's my colleague. So that's one side. But like with my TSC hat on, or observer hat on, I would say it ought to be part of the core, because we ought to be doing KES properly, and KES, doing KES properly should be a dependency of the node, and therefore, and if the node is core, therefore it should be core. And if you can't effectively use it without the tools to do it, then you're not really. So I would argue in that case it's part of core. But yes, yeah. On the other hand, the person who's actually working on it is a colleague of mine. And he's not working on it right now. Due to point one on the agenda.
Does raise the question of because IO's budget actually included a work item that named Well-Typed as one of the co-contractors for actually doing the integration work for the KES agent and LSM. So there is a question of how that proceeds now that IOG and Well-Typed at least are no longer having a direct working relationship. So, but let's go ahead to Marcus and Neil, because we do have to move on and be mindful of everybody's time today. But I appreciate you, Duncan. You've done a great job so far.
I want to jump in here on, so let's say last time here, KES agents, it's one item, but I will say in front of the TSC and the challenges we have ahead, it's just one and a relative small item. But while we discussed it, there was some things said right just a couple of minutes ago here, and then I raised my hand. For example, about messaging and how it was communicated or not communicated or held away from public knowledge in the past. This brings up a question: how is this going to happen, and how do we handle this as TSC or as community member, as developers, as operators, and as ADA holders in the near future and in mid and long term? So there is not only a KES agent, and there is not only core items, but there are also bugs. One of them, or a couple of them, are even very, very critical bugs. And we had them in the last couple of months multiple times. But so far, there is absolutely no public acknowledgement, no post-mortem, and no explanation. So the question that I want to raise here in the TSC, and especially to the main deliverer or the main entity who is entitled to deliver these things, and also responsible to well, first created this and then had to fix these bugs, is will there be a public declaration and explanation how this will be handled in the future? Will there be more transparency? Will we as TSC be in place and in a position at all to request and demand explanation for this in time? How is this supposed to happen in the near future?
I should possibly answer or try my best to answer that one. So as everyone here is aware, there has been the purpose of the committees has really come under question over what are their roles and their remits. And I know that there is a plan with Jack, who's now leading Intersect, to work with the board and each of the committees to work through what that remit looks like. So the answer is that at this stage we can't say for sure, and we're not sure. I know that Jack, is talking about he wants to try to have a collaborative approach on building a role. This is particularly pertinent to the TSC, to be very honest. So this is this sort of question that I'm sure that they're looking for the TSC to raise, to ask, is this where we can provide oversight, and it can be helpful to act as that that bridge between the community and those that are doing technical work. So that's maybe a long answer to say at this stage we don't know, because the board needs to set the mandates for each of the committees, but we are looking for the committees to help shape what that looks like. So
Marcus, you're muted.
Ultimately, it's just very important that we, as members of a technical or whatever else committee, don't end up just as front-end figures, and actually decision making or whatever happens is happening somewhere else. What is very, I have to admit, yes, there is standard procedures in software bug and security handling, and not everything always needs to be fully transparent. At the same moment, it's also, I'm fully convinced that it can also not be a case that the default answer is always, no, this is security relevant, we don't go public with it. Especially in our open, permissionless and decentralized decision making, because we put decision makers, DREPs, in a position where they have to vote on something they don't know. And we already had this in the recent past on the previous hard fork. This, in my opinion, is very, very critical. This is not conscious decision making, and it is consciously hold away information for people. So this is very critical, in my opinion, and not tolerable in the near future anymore.
All right. Yeah. Thank you, Marcus. I think I would generally be in agreement with that as well. I'm more in favor of open public transparency. So everybody's all playing by the same rules and the same set of information. But Neil, go ahead. You've had your hand up for a while now.
I've been patient. So I just want to bring back to the nature of why I think the CARES agent is needed or something like it. I have some good mates who run banks, right? And I'm talking major banks that do this. Well, a good mate of mine called Dave. Let's call this man Dave because he's called Dave. And something like this would basically be a big no-no for adoption, right? The key point here, I realize SPO.
You mean the lack of a CARES agent?
The lack
would
of
be
the fact that the CARES note, the zeroth key is on disk. the fact that they can be recovered, the fact that those could help grinding attacks and various other things, were they to be released, right, basically makes, the fact that it fails, the implementation fails to meet the scientific standards that it was set, right? You know, I've actually talked to Dave about this, and he said we wouldn't touch it with a barge pole because of that. So I think I'm saying, to me, it's an important part of reducing the step up to get corporate adoption. And I know we don't necessarily like the corporate world too much, but we do need to work with them in that sense. That's my last point on that.
Yeah, so you're trying to get up to compliance requirements.
Well, you've got to be careful. Yeah, it's not just sort of SEC compliance, but this will be internal.
No, I didn't say SEC. I meant the requirements for this kind of implementation.
Internal governance requirements where they're doing risk assessments.
I suppose there's two bits to that, right? Because one is, you know, if we had never had KES in the first place, they would never have said, oh, well, you know, it's a problem. They would have said, you don't have forward security. But here we kind of like said, we did have forward security, but then we really didn't, which is obviously not great. But then, you know, forward security in itself is actually a good thing. And I think it's worth probably us taking more time to explain that to the community. What does it really mean? You know, what is the practical attack what does the attack look like that forward security is there to stop? Because it's not actually grinding, if I remember the paper right. It's about creating false histories.
Right.
Recovering keys from enough SPOs, including retired SPOs, and then using that to be able to create false histories.
Ironically, that could still happen even with the KES agent being implemented, right?
Yes, certainly for the period up until
prior to full adoption.
Yeah. But you know, late is better than never.
Exactly. Yeah, fair point.
All right, but yeah, so I don't know that we have necessarily a resolution or even a motion at this point, but I appreciate having some better open discussion about it and more to consider to get to that final discussion. So thank you very much, Duncan, as always, for sharing your vast knowledge with us. If we could, I guess, since we have one more item that may be for public open session, which seems to be this Twitter account. So Duncan S., please, if you could introduce that one to us.
I'll be honest, I'm not 100% sure. I think this was put on here by Kevin, but just to say that we have, following last week's actions, I see that we had a joiner briefly who has now subsequently departed, but we now have got our meetings on the public Intersect calendar, so we are much more visible for the community to come and join. There's one rule of operation that I was given by Tex when setting this up, that asking that the link to the meeting isn't put on X. Apparently
people just come in and spam and do all sorts of crazy stuff. So there's past experience with that being a problem. Yes.
Grand. I was told that posting it on Discord is acceptable. So if we
within the closed, because there's members in the Intersect membership, it's less of a problem there because people have paid to get through and have permissions.
Yep. Alternatively, we have the link to the Intersect calendar, so which I believe is limited, and so sharing that is more.
It's also less likely to be scraped. X or Twitter is constantly being scraped for these kind of links, and people just jump in. It gets very pornographic at times.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, you only make that mistake of publishing an open Google meeting link on X one time, and then you very quickly learn to never, ever do that again.
Yes, I've done it once and never done it again.
Okay. But in addition to that, and trying to facilitate more engagement between the TSC and the wider Cardano community. We also now have our own Twitter account. This has been endorsed by Jack Briggs, who is encouraging all committees to seize control of their comms and to engage directly. So that has been an ongoing issue with Intersect. We originally set up with a comms team. They work very hard, but they are completely overwhelmed. I think it's fair to say, and have been for a while. So I think it just makes really good sense that we have this. I personally think it would be helpful for me. I'm very happy to run a lot of all the weekly things associated with it, pushing out minutes, the YouTube channel that we have, the links to our knowledge base, and anything else that's standard. And if perhaps we can create a remit on what you're happy to just leave to me, that might be quite helpful. So, and then we're not any spectral comms and things, we can go through the sign-off process that we have. Hi, Adam.
Yeah, that was actually why I had raised my hand. I feel like, so for one, we need to identify who has access to this account, which it sounds like you do personally, Duncan, which being the sitting secretary of Intersect, or of this committee on behalf of Intersect, makes sense. But we probably do need to make sure that some higher level person in the Intersect social media team also maybe has access to that account, so that if there were to be a personnel move in one direction or another, we don't lose access or have that account go rogue. And then also having some clearly defined in our charter, or our whatever you would call it, the committee mission statement, essentially, what the secretary is allowed to post, kind of carte blanche, and then what would bubble up to the level of requiring, a quorum of committee members to approve comms going out. So that way, again, we don't have rogue communications coming from that we've seen, especially in recent history. We seem to have some lopsided communication, asynchronous or dissymmetry, if you will. So yeah, I would like to make sure that whatever's coming out of this official TSC comms platform does have at least majority approval by the sitting members of the body. But yeah, I mean, I'm happy if we set something like some common sense, like the weekly minutes after ratification by or review by the committee, publication of the recordings, if that's going to be a thing. Any of that kind of bog standard work, and then any special comms just raise up and get some sort of an internal polling done.
Yeah, for example, completion of delivery milestones might be one that there's some standard as part of the sign-off process. I don't know if everyone here has actually seen those, but when a company has a milestone that they're claiming for, they'll list out what they've achieved, where it is. There'll be a comment on those that have checked the work, but we also have a box for comms on what's been done and to be achieved, that the company is happy, whether that's a well-typed or a twig or an IOG, is happy to share. That's one that perhaps could we just lift and shift that straight into the TSC channel, or would that, to save getting bogged down with everyone having to write the time we have a milestone that's completed, but again increases the visibility of what's being done and accomplished.
Yeah, again, I guess as long as the TSC is actually the one that's reviewing and approving those milestones, because I mean, the only one that I'm aware of us having actually done that for so far is for Twig, for the Paris scope of work. But I would not be okay with the TSC official signing off on an IOG or well-typed or PN Sol work stream that this body did not review and approve and actually endorse as being completed, right? So if strictly Intersect bureaucrats on the back end are doing that without explicitly getting TSC review and approval, then it should not be coming out of the TSC comms department.
Absolutely. There are potentially, with the introduction of smart contract, this is moving slightly different here, getting off topic, but for the last year and a half nearly, we've had a process where the TSC have signed off on milestones. I guess there's not been very many of late because we haven't had any money, because we haven't had a budget, but it would be signed off by this committee, and then get signed off that the process has been followed by Intersect. So in that time, you would see the communications piece that's been put out. So that may alter slightly with the smart contract piece, but that's another topic in the coming weeks that we need to address.
All right, fantastic. Well, we have about 7 minutes left in our regular, so I was just going to open for any other business. So Ricky, please go ahead.
Can we just go back to item 3 for a moment? The support and maintenance contract. We've been delivering against this for the past 3 months, and we still don't have a signed contract. What's going on, guys?
Well, my understanding was that was still with, as of 10 days ago, when I last messaged procurement in Intersect, that was still with IOG's legal team.
Okay.
So, Ricky, could you check if that is the case? And if it's not, clearly then it sits with Intersect.
Okay. Yeah. I am not aware of it being blocked on our end, so I will definitely look into it right now.
Fantastic. Okay.
And if I may, under any other business, today I tried to vote on the new members for the TSC and was unable to do so. Can anybody tell me what was going on there?
Voting closed at 12 UTC today. What time did you try?
In the morning.
Well, that's a
It
shame.
said there were 3 hours left, but that it didn't give me any ability to vote.
I'm not sure, because I was able to vote half an hour before close because I had some tidy up to do myself. I'm sorry that happened.
Yeah. Anyway, I thought I'd just let everybody know.
Absolutely. So yeah, Duncan, can you make sure that gets at least issue reported to the relevant owner party within Intersect, that maybe some of the membership were unable or experiencing issues that need to be investigated as part of the committee elections?
Do you have any? I absolutely will do. I'll take that as an action. Do you have any screenshots of any of the errors or anything that you got?
I got an error message up. The error message was something about being a new member.
Oh, yes, there was a thing that said if you registered and paid your dues and had only just become an Intersect member after the election began, you wouldn't be able to vote. I take it that wasn't the case for you, and it's been misidentified.
No. I have. This is my personal. I've been speaking here on behalf of IOA. I decided to open a personal account before I would vote, and so actually I just signed up this morning.
I see. That is the reason. Then I can answer the question. The reason they did that is because the last election there was a large amount of signups and a potential alleged civil attack. I don't know if that's true or not, but this was some sort of resistance mechanism that was put in place and communicated before the beginning of the vote.
Very sorry, Ricky. That wasn't. That comms didn't reach you. I can confirm that has been an ongoing issue that's been raised by the ISC about the susceptibility to civil attack and what can be done to mitigate it. So that
will be the reason then. Okay. All right. Thank you.
What I will do though is just mention that clearly maybe this hasn't been communicated well enough. So that
I certainly didn't know about it. That's for sure. I might be the only person in the world who didn't. There you go. All right.
Yeah, I think you had to be a signed up member by mid-April sometime, if I recall correctly, but I don't even remember what the date was, maybe April 11th or something like that. And again, yeah, as Johnny mentioned, it was at least a first step attack to avoid a bunch of last minute brigading to get a whole bunch of people to sign up and vote for somebody to push them over the threshold, essentially.
Okay.
So whether or not that's a good choice, I don't know.
Yeah,
So.
it's a bit of a blunt hammer, but we weren't part of the decision making on that.
All right. Thanks. All right. Thanks, guys. I will sign off now. See you next week.
Goodbye.
All right.
Goodbye.
Yep. Thank you, everybody. In that case, I'll go ahead and motion to close and adjourn this meeting, and we can switch to the, what do we call it, in-camera session of the voting members. All right. Thank you, everybody.
Bye-bye.